The original owner was, one season away from bankruptcy constantly. And so when he went to sell, he made a decision. I don't want to sell to some private equity firm who's just going to ship it all to China. I want someone to help us who match our values.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. Welcome to this episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. I'm Ed Marsh, your host, and today I'm joined by Dianna Huff. I have followed Dianna for a long time for her industrial marketing and web design insights, but lately she's really focused on a campaign to buy American. And that's led to some interesting threads and conversations we're going to dig into today. In fact, we're going to have an uninformed debate on the role of private equity in challenges and opportunities American companies face. And I'll tell you up front, neither Dianna nor I are in that space, but we observe it from the outside. And so we're going to kind of pull on that thread and have that conversation. She is the president of Huff Industrial Marketing and has a rich background in all aspects of manufacturing and industrial marketing communications. She started her career actually in California, running a boat show for the Northern California Marine Association. And then she had a lengthy career in operations that kind of morphed into marketing, followed by a cross-country move that we'll probably hear more about. But if we were going to define her, her passion is working with smaller American manufacturers. She loves making a difference in the lives of the people, the company owners, the company workers, the communities. And her vision is to keep manufacturing jobs stateside, or perhaps, as we'll talk about, maybe even bring more of them back stateside. She's been buying Made in USA herself, really focused on it since 2015. We're probably going to touch some third rails in this conversation. We may make some of you angry. Some may completely agree. Some may cheer for it. Either way, please comment on the episode so we can have a conversation about it, because these are important topics. And be sure to like and share and subscribe too. So Dianna, thank you. Welcome. And thanks for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And just so you know, made in USA, and my trousers are made in USA and my socks.
All right. Well, I guess the computer that we're talking on probably isn't, but we'll talk more about all this. All right. So we're obviously going to jump into the topics of Made in America. We're going to talk about private equity, but we need some context first. So help us understand who Dianna is. You started with a master's in English. What drew you to that?
I have a master's degree. I always laugh. 18th and 19th century British literature written by women like, Jane Austen.
Right.
I actually was working toward becoming a high school English teacher. And for various reasons, I didn't make it in. They only allowed 2 people into the program. So once I received that notice, then I said, well, I'm going to go get my PhD, and then realized that's not really what I want to do either. So I went to career counseling, and after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, they make you take all these tests and everything. And she said, there's a word for people like you. It's called marketing communications. So I was working at Precision Technical Sewing. It had been there 7 years. I was the office manager, and I put together a portfolio, and I talked my way into a job at Varian Associates. So that's what started me in marketing.
But if I'm kind of reading between the lines correctly about your time at Technical Sewing, you actually started doing marketing there. You might not have known that's what it was called.
I was doing marketing there. That's why the career counselor, she kept asking me about all this stuff I was doing, and I was running the front office. I was doing everything, payroll.
Right.
People would come in off the street, pick up, because the owner was also a sailor, and we repaired sails. So every Friday there was this influx of people picking up their repaired sails, and I was shipping things out to and this was in the Silicon Valley. We were right right. I could walk down the street and there was Sun Microsystems. So
Right.
we were in Silicon Graphics before Google was there. And so I was shipping out all these industrial sewn products all over the place. I was doing everything, but also I kept asking, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? And I was attending Chamber of Commerce meetings and doing press releases, even though I didn't know how, and writing articles for the trade publication. And I did not know what I was doing, but I was doing it.
Well, when I got
Yeah.
out of the Army, they had me take a lot of those tests as well. And in the end, they told me I needed to either be a florist or a shepherd. So I don't know, maybe certainly my life would have turned out differently if I'd followed that advice. I'm not sure it would have been better. And so it was natural. You're in Silicon Valley. You formally go into marketing, and so you go into tech.
Yes. Yep. A life science. So I supported 2 factories, Analytical Instruments and Nuclear Magnetic Resonance.
Okay.
Yes.
And so very technical topics.
Yes.
Was not your background or probably your natural approach. How did you find yourself in that environment where people believe that marketing was telling the story of the bits and bytes?
I don't know if I approached it that way. It was more, I was in marketing communications. I was at the bottom. I had to learn everything because I didn't know anything. I just remember the big boss, the director, coming down to my cubicle. Who wrote this?
Because it wasn't corporate speak, or why?
Yes. And so she was very nice. She sat down. I mean, I learned so much from her, how to write press releases, how to find the hook,
Right.
a lot about writing, like how to admit, even before that guy who wrote, Steve Krug, who wrote that book about websites, and he had that chapter, omit needless words, and he crossed out needless. But she did a lot of that. When you structure your sentence this way, it's hard to read. I was there for 2.5 years, and I learned. I was in charge of producing 3 different print newsletters back in the day when you sent out collateral and people
Right.
could fill out those bingo cards.
Right.
Yeah. So I did that, and they had to be translated into 5, 6, 7 different languages. So I managed all of that, and that was right when email was coming in. So a lot of stuff was done over fax machine to all these various global offices, and
Right.
I got a real education.
And then you pulled up roots and moved cross country. You became an adjunct professor of writing at Northeastern. What prompted that move?
So I met I met my husband, who's no longer alive, but and we had divorced before he died. But it's a long story. But anyway, he moved out to get a job at Varian. That's how we met, and he was from Worcester, Mass.
Okay.
And he did not like California, and so this was right when the .com boom was happening, and California really changed. And, I can just remember sitting in gridlock on the 101 trying to get to work, and it's just not moving.
Right.
And he said, our life would be so much better if we moved back east. So he got a job at the competitor of Varian, and we pulled up and moved to Massachusetts. And, it was like culture shock. I'd never been to the East Coast, or at least, to here, New England. I'd been to Washington, D.C. It was Amesbury, Massachusetts, which was an old mill town, which I'd never seen before. When he first drove me through, I burst into tears.
Oh, man.
I was back on dial-up, after working at Varian with their T1 line, and it was just, people would talk and I would say, "What did you say?"
But here you are, whatever it is, 20 years later, and you're like a New Englander now.
Yeah, you can't pry me out of here. I'm in New Hampshire now. I love it. So I went out. I thought I was going to try and get a job at Varian because there was one in Gloucester, Mass. And then I just remember waking up one day and saying, I don't want to go back and do that. I want to be home with my son. I'm going to go into business for myself. I don't recommend doing it that way, but that's how I did it. And I was a member of the International Association of Business Communicators. And that was back when they had a print directory. And I called every single person in Massachusetts and New Hampshire to get meetings to pitch my portfolio and to be a freelance writer. And I built my business from scratch.
And you were in it for 15 years. You were working with multinationals. You were working on SEO, which at the time was, when you started it, SEO wasn't even a topic. And then it became.
And that's how I got started. Someone called me and said, I think it was this cranky Gloucester.
Well, he's from New England. Of course he's cranky, right?
I've been searching for a freelance writer. And do you know, I finally found you and your website's not optimized. I'm like, what the hell is that? And he explained it and hung up the phone. I looked it up and I'm like, oh, and I started teaching myself. And the first thing I did was I bought Words. Remember Overture? It was the precursor to ads. Okay. Yahoo bought it. And so I put ads. I bid on freelance copywriter and Marcom writer and marketing communications copywriter. And marketing communications copywriter is where I got the most leads. And I never went back.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
But then after doing that for 15 years, you stopped that and you pivoted and set up Huff Industrial Marketing. So was it really just an evolution of the same business, or was it a completely new business?
It's both.
Okay.
So by that time, my son had grown, got his driver's license, peeled out of the driveway the day he turned 16.
Back when 16-year-old boys wanted to do that.
Yeah, Green Day blaring.
Right.
And I came back. I just remember thinking, well, now what do I do? Because my whole life was schlepping him back and forth all over the place and trying to squeeze in work. And by that time, I was really burned out. I had ghostwritten 3 books. I was doing all this work for all these companies. And I remember reading the book Essentialism by Greg McHugh. I think that's his last name. But I just remember writing a note in there saying, I want to build the business based on my own ideas versus all these guru ideas. I want to do it my way. And so I realized I wanted to work with smaller manufacturers, and I sort of tested it out for 6 months without changing my business name or anything, and realized this is what I really want to do, and went to the State House and changed. And it's been a progress. It's been a work in progress. I'm really happy.
Oh, good. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you began to think more about small manufacturing, and that kind of begins to lead us into some of where we're going today. Obviously, offshoring had become quite common in the 90s.
Which I didn't know.
Okay.
That was the thing. I'm not a big shopper, so I didn't realize everything had gone offshore.
I realized it. Well, in the 90s, when I was in industrial sales and sales management, I saw that a lot of our business was going away.
Oh, okay.
And so I was acutely aware of it. I mean, I'm not sure that I was insightful enough to recognize it was a big problem beyond my selfish interest of, I had to go replace that business. I didn't kind of understand some of the social impacts it was going to have. But certainly, I mean, you talk about Amesbury. There were towns that were being eviscerated, and the mill towns had been eviscerated long before that.
Yes. And it's funny, and it's so, I have to back up. I used to write for Ann Holland, who had Marketing Sherpa, and she used to send me 1-sentence assignments. Write a report about blah. So she said, write a report about marketing to China. And it ended up being a 2-part report. Now it was supposed to be, because remember when they were entered into the World Trade Organization, right. It was supposed to be a great boon for America because we'd had this open market. Right. So that's what I wrote about, but it actually went the other way. And so I had always had all that information in my head thinking, I didn't realize that our whole entire manufacturing base was destroyed.
Yeah, so obviously not the whole entire base, but certainly
a good deal of it.
Right. Okay, so industrial marketing. What do you think most small manufacturing companies get wrong about that topic?
About industrial marketing? That they can ignore it.
Okay.
Or it's just something simple like posting something on a social media platform, or that they can do they can make a do-it-yourself website, and that's all they need.
Right.
They don't understand there's a level of sophistication that's needed. And also, I think the thing they get wrong the most is that we are all brand perceptive now. Because of social media, we are used to really nice photographs. We're very image oriented now, and when a brand makes a mistake, right? It could be any brand, but because there are so many tools now that make it so easy to create some kind of whatever,
Right.
Your iPhone for photos, Wix for a website, or whatever. Um, it makes it so that I always tell people, you judge a person immediately based on their clothes, what they look like, what they're, all this stuff.
Right.
And yet you create a website that has broken links or some broken this or broken that. If you are you're selling yourself as a manufacturer of precision parts or whatever, and your website sucks.
Right.
How does that reflect on you? And
Sure.
that's the disconnect people make all the time.
I remember a few years ago, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, probably I would say around the peak of the inbound marketing frenzy, when you explained in a blog that you had won a new client. It was a small manufacturer that needed a website, and you won that client specifically because you didn't go in saying that he needed a blog, and every other marketer was telling him that. So what do you think the role of a website is for an industrial manufacturer?
The role, well, several years ago, I would have said to get leads, because that's what everybody says. But the role of a website now is to communicate who you are, communicate your expertise, demonstrate your expertise. It's to attract new prospective hires. It's to attract prospective customers. It's to show the work you do. So it has to be, if you're telling people that you create, these beautiful machine parts that are defect free, then your website needs to do the same thing. And it has to attract the people who are going to help you make that vision reality.
And I completely agree with your point about how we used to think of it as lead gen. And now the Sparktora research is something I just keep thinking about. Only 28% of all organic searches ever click on an organic link. And so if the idea of your website is to go through this SEO, content marketing, lead generation playbook that so many of the agencies still talk about, I don't see it working for that. On the other hand, the website is, I would say, more critical than it ever was for many of the reasons you're talking about.
Yeah, when we did one last year, and the company was subsequently bought, so that it's no longer up the website. But a week after we posted it, he hired his first guy. He said, we never had this much traction on our job applications before. And I said, yeah, that's because now people can come to the website and see what it's like to work for you.
Right.
Excuse me. Hold on. Sorry.
So talk a little bit about Huff Industrial Marketing, what you do, who you do it for, and what you would say differentiates you.
So we work with smaller U.S. industrial manufacturers.
How do you define small?
50 or fewer, no marketing department.
Okay.
They can have 50, 55, 60, but generally no marketing department, or a one-person marketing department, which is
well,
generally...
that's true of many of them up to $200 million.
Oh, it's usually the sales and marketing director, right?
Right.
who's wearing all the hats.
Right.
So we work with them, and we specialize in building custom build websites, meaning we do the whole thing custom, from the strategy, positioning, writing the copy, the design. We don't do any web builders, anything like that. Everything's custom. And then we do follow-on custom marketing programs. And by custom, I mean, we don't do prepackaged, meaning, so we base it on what's your budget, what are your goals, what's already working if you're doing anything at all. And then we can build out. So we can do it in phases. Like we can let's just start with Google Ads and get a sense of what people are coming to the website for. And then, okay, now let's start building out some content. And, so we do it slowly.
And all industrial manufacturing.
Yes.
When Andrew Davis first introduced us, I'm guessing that's probably 7 or 8 or maybe 10 years ago, you were actually publishing a monthly magazine, Manufacturing Marketing. How did that get started?
Oh, because when I started Huff Industrial Marketing, I did the thing that seemed natural to me. I started pitching article ideas to all these trade publications, and no one wanted them. Because, they want process improvements. They
Right.
don't want marketing advice. And so I, s- I said, okay, expletive. I'm going to do it myself. And so I asked my designer, Rachel Cunliffe, you want to do this magazine with me? And so that was how it started.
Was there a
Again,
physical
another
print
spur of the
edition?
moment. What?
Was there a physical print edition, or was it only
We
digital?
talked about it, but doing a magazine is like having it's a whole job. And we talked about selling advertising, but here I am trying to work and build a business, and Rachel has a family, and it was a lot of work. It really
Well,
was.
it's a massive amount of work. What was your peak subscriber count?
I think we actually got up to 300 or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, you must have asked yourself every month as you were working,
We
I'm sure,
did.
80 hours a week, was it worth it?
We did. We did a lot. And I look back at the issues and think, wow, that was really good content. I mean,
Right.
we worked really hard on it. And Rachel's a fantastic designer. And it was like the more we did it, the better we got. But it just didn't seem to get traction.
And so in 22, you stopped it.
Yep.
But one of the key themes that kind of had emerged from it was this Made in USA. And so you
Yes, and it
pivoted your
started in
blog.
2018.
Okay.
That's when I started. And it's, when I started the whole Made in USA thing, and I remember doing a couple of posts on Twitter, which is where I used to be really active. And I had a couple of people say to me, that's really political. And like, it is.
Wow.
And so I was really nervous and scared. And so I started posting some things in the magazine, and people would respond to it. They would thank me. And so when we stopped the magazine, we went a couple months, and I said, I miss writing this. And so Rachel does. The reason I love working with Rachel is she is designer to the top food bloggers in the world. So, I mean, like, some of the top food bloggers are her. She's amazing. You should go look at her work. Your mouth starts drooling. You're looking at all these food pictures. And so I said, I want to do a blog. Can you help me? And of course she can help me, but she suggested what she called the magazine style blog, which is what her food bloggers do. So that's how we created this blog.
Okay, but back to 2018, what triggered the Made in USA emphasis?
Because I've been renovating my house,
Okay.
and I was buying more and more Made in USA, and I wanted to talk about it. I actually started another blog, which ended after a few months, called mymadeinusahouse.com, because everything, I was just so focused on Made in USA. The more I focused on it, the more I was learning. So I wanted to share it. And I also was writing for Search Engine Land for a while. And I asked, is it okay if I write about manufacturing? And I did 3 articles about how to find stuff made in USA through search. So that's what started it. And I was getting more feedback.
And then you had a quiet couple of years. You stepped back from it for a while. From the blog, I think from like middle of 22 until early. And
because I got a dog.
Got it.
I got Rocky. He's, for those who are listening, he's a working line German Shepherd, and his lines are from Czechoslovakia and Germany. And I didn't realize there was a huge difference between working line and show line. And, oh my God. I have a neighbor who has a male German Shepherd, and I thought it was just me, that I was this old lady who can't handle a dog. And he's 20 years younger, and he said, I lost 25 pounds the first year.
Well, through your emails, you haven't been publishing the blog, but you've been sending periodic emails. And I think anyone in your email list has watched Rocky grow up and gotten to know him.
Yes. Yeah. He's much calmer now.
Right.
But those first 2 years, there's a good meme. It says what it's like, what people expect when they get their first German Shepherd puppy, and it's this cute dog who's because German Shepherds are known for being obedient and smart, and the dog is, and then reality is this big gigantic dinosaur with big teeth. That was it.
And also you have an interest in birds, and we've shared that interest and exchanged email notes on bird watching technology. You rigged a camera on one of your feeders. Actually, I guess it was spying on some of your phone conversations. You had to take it off.
And my neighbors, yeah. And I guess I didn't realize law enforcement, if they know you have a camera, they can ask for your footage.
Really?
And so, I just had it out back here, but sometimes I'd see the neighbors walking by and then it was recording my phone conversations when the window was open. So I took it down.
Right. There's this cool device I sponsored on Kickstarter. It took them a couple of years, and I finally came out with it. It's called Terra, which is basically a microphone that sits outside in the backyard, and it connects, I think, to the Cornell Merlin database, and it listens to the songs and uses AI to figure out what birds are in your yard. That's kind of cool.
Oh, cool. My Wild Birds Unlimited, they have that Cornell, they have a video running.
Right.
They have a monitor up on the wall, and you can watch those birds. That's amazing.
So, kind of New England, we've got this spirit of individualism. We've got these empty mill towns that are part of our legacy, and I assume that has fostered some of your focus on it. Yeah, I mean, in your blog recently, you featured companies doing cookware and blue jeans and socks and flannel shirts and mailboxes and bike bags and olive oil and more. And most of it comes from this first person experience you have where you go to the store to try to find something in this journey that you go on trying to actually find something made in the USA.
Yes. Yes, that's it's all personal experience. Yep. That's why I make a real emphasis on I'm not paid. I'm not a paid influencer. I don't do affiliate links. The blog is my way of giving back to manufacturing as a way to support my clients. And also because now it's just fun, and I don't accept free products. Although if someone wants to give me, friends and family, a slight discount, I'll accept that, but I don't accept free products or anything. And and I make mistakes. I think I posted one about the dish towels. Did you see that one?
I don't recall it.
Oh, so I'm at the farmer's market and someone is selling dish towels and I'm looking all over like, where is it made? And she said, what are you looking for? I said, I want to know where it's made. And she said, okay, hold on. And she said, oh, it's made in California. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, right here, made in California. I said, okay. So I bought it. I bought two, brought them home, took off the little cardboard wrap. And then the reason why I couldn't see the tag was because whoever had manufactured it had put it's on my blog. They put like a little piece of cloth over it. And so when you took it off, it said made in China. I was so mad. Oh.
All right. Well, that's kind of inspired passion in you. And on February 26th this year, you sent an email with the subject line, "We're losing our well-being to private equity." And you shared in that blog or in that email, you shared the book Plunder by a guy, Brandon Blue. I haven't read it, but obviously that made a very strong impression on you.
I'm still reading it. It's so he even says in the book that not all private equity is bad, and that they, as you and I discussed earlier, they will come in and help manufacturers get up to speed in terms of efficiencies or whatever they have to do to make themselves stronger. But he does talk about, and private equity is not just in manufacturing. He's talking about how they're buying up nursing homes,
sure,
and providing substandard care. Prisons is another one. The food service in prisons has gone way down because of private equity, and then manufacturing. So they go in and they buy companies or brands, as they call them, and then they just dismantle them and sell them off for pieces.
Right. All right. Well, we're gonna dig into that, but there's along the way we shared a couple other book recommendations as well. I had suggested to you a book called "The Man Who Broke Capitalism," written by a guy David Gellis, I think you say his name. It was about
Okay.
Jack Welch.
Okay.
We both read "Factory Man" by Beth Macy about
Yes,
how.
and also Barbarians at the Gate about the takeover of RJR Nabisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Factory Man is about the way offshoring decimated the furniture manufacturing
Yes.
industry
Yes.
and a town and a family in Virginia. I mean, it's got a happy ending. That's the good news, but I mean, a very painful journey along the way. So where would you say, as you look at it, and you've talked to many small manufacturing companies, where did the problems begin for Made in America manufacturing?
I would say, I mean, I'm not an expert. I mean, we already established
Yeah,
that. I mean,
that's clear. We'll say it again. Neither of us are. This is just kind of personal opinion and reflection.
I would say the focus on profits. You can because here in America, you have to pay labor, workman's comp. There's all the regulations. There's all the stuff that adds to the cost of producing goods. So if you ship them overseas, if you ship manufacturing overseas, a lot of those regulations don't exist. The labor is considerably less, uh, and it's almost slave labor, and uh, so then you can then have all those products made, send them back to the U.S. and sell them for hefty profit.
Or even send them back in partial components and assemble
And then
them in the
send
U.S. and
them
say it's
here.
made in the
Yeah,
U.S.
yeah,
There's all
yeah,
kinds
yeah,
of
yeah.
games to play for sure.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier when I was a sales rep and a sales manager in the industrial manufacturing space, I saw this start to happen in the 90s and the aughts. I guess we say the 2000 to 2010, and I saw so U.S. companies were moving overseas and offshore competition started to come in. On the other hand, that's been going on for years. I mean, we talked about Amesbury, we talked about these New England mill towns. These mill towns were emptied out when textile manufacturing moved to the southern U.S. But in fact, these mill towns began when textile manufacturing moved out of the U.K. So to some extent, there's just kind of this evolution of manufacturing, right?
I agree. I'm constantly saying that when I write a blog post. I get it. I'm a capitalist. I get it, and I get change. And I think about. So I bought. No, I did a blog post about the webbing made for my dog's collars and leash, and
Okay.
it used to be a hand process. It was done by hand by expert weavers. But then someone created a machine to create. I forget what the name of this webbing type is called, but it's on my blog. But some guy created a machine that could do it and wiped out all the hand crafters, right? The crafters who did it by hand. So now, and I think about that a lot as here's AI wiping out people who do writing.
Right.
I mean, or graphic design or marketing or whatever. I mean, I think about that. So I'm not, this Pollyanna living out in the clouds, and I get it. But on the other hand, what's the cost? That's what
Of,
I think about.
yeah, of course. The interesting thing is having been in industrial sales through that really wrenching period of change, or when we first started to see it, one of the things that was clear to me was that in many ways, U.S. manufacturers had gotten fat and lazy, and globalization helped to reveal that in
Yes,
ways that
and
I'm
it
not
helped them
sure.
become much more efficient. I mean,
Exactly.
I go into places now, you could eat off the factory floor.
Right.
I mean, it's pristine. And when I do tours, that's all people talk about is we've done this, we've done this. I mean, they're like any tiny process improvement they can make, they'll do it.
Right.
Yeah, because the competition is so fierce.
I think maybe the challenge is that there was a generation of business leaders kind of characterized by Jack Welch, at least the way I understand that you could see his contributions to business in two very different lights. And there's a continuum. The answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. But the way the Gellis book describes it, really cold calculating financial decisions without regard to some public good, like the strength of the manufacturing industry in the U.S. And that's led to the fact that we now have a largely service-based economy. And while total manufacturing output hasn't changed a lot, certainly manufacturing employment has changed a lot. And that means that there are communities that have lost anchor employers.
Yes.
On the other hand, I've sold a lot of manufacturing automation over the years. I've sold it myself and I've helped others sell it. And I don't think necessarily automation is bad. I work with some welding robot companies now where the robots are used in situations where they simply can't hire and retain enough skilled welders, or where the work is just horribly boring and routine, and no thoughtful person wants to just do that all day
Right.
long,
Right.
or where there's very specific quality issues, and the automation helps ensure consistent quality. So those feel like good reasons to me
Right. And
for
I did a
automation.
tour of Matthews Brothers Windows up in Maine.
Okay.
And, they had a computer welder. I mean, not a welder, a computer cutter on the glass.
Right.
It was amazing. And they had two people there who were, once the glass is cut, they have to slot it wherever it's supposed to go. Anyway, what's his name? Bob Maidens, who gave me the tour, he said the cutter, no one can cut as precisely as this cutter and, or this computer. And, so what the benefits are, people aren't getting cutting it, right? Because it's dangerous, it's sharp. The glass savings. So the computer is able to configure the glass and now you have less wastage.
Right.
And it's faster. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to any of this. I get it. I do. But, I have a hard time with making these calculations without taking into, well, what does it do to the people?
Of course, absolutely. And I think that's why conversations like this are important. And the reality is there is no straightforward, easy answer. That's why these problems are intractable in many ways. The flip side is if I'm the manager of financial assets, if I'm managing retirement assets for a teachers union or a firefighters union or something like that, my job is to maximize their return. And if a guy like Jack Welch, who's slashing and burning and moving things overseas, is generating higher profit and better returns for the retirement fund, then part of me says that's my responsibility and I have to do that. So how do we balance that?
I don't have an answer. I don't know.
and that's a fair answer. And I think that's part of why this stuff is so hard. All right.
Yeah,
So let's,
and I keep thinking about your fat and lazy comment. Also, I think I was thinking while you were, I think one of the things that was going on too, we had gas that was 20 cents a gallon.
mm-hmm.
Remember those days? So
Mm-hmm.
It was easy. I think it was easy for U.S. manufacturers because I was thinking about cars. Remember
Right.
the big, the big 4-door Buicks and,
Right.
and Europe had much more efficient cars. And then all of a sudden our gas crisis hit. And I think that's what really showed up our inefficiencies because we were reliant on cheap energy, which is not, it's not bad. It's just, there was no incentive to be more efficient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, then there's always this interesting angle of creative destruction, because then that was a wrenching wake-up call. And then along the way, we had fracking, which meant that now we've got natural gas that's incredibly affordable, that has helped energy-intensive American manufacturing industries. And Europe has lost a lot of that. I mean, the chemical manufacturing that's very energy-intensive, many of them are shutting down in Germany. So
No, I didn't
there's
know that.
always this cycle.
Right. You're absolutely right.
So private equity, I guess you said in his book, he said it's not all bad, but I think let's dive more into this. It's a fascinating topic. And again, for the record, neither of us are finance folks, and we may hold positions that are uninformed. That being said, I think we're both completely genuine and good intentioned about this. And so as we dive into it, it feels to me as a baseline, maybe a place to agree, is that certainly many buyouts have shut down American manufacturing and shifted it overseas. On the other hand, certainly many strategic buyouts may have done the same. If somebody just wants the IP or just wants the customer list, then they can shut it down just like a financial investor could. But if we look at it from another angle, I think many manufacturers have gotten really good at making their stuff. It's higher quality, it's more efficient. You talk about the automation cutting the glass and the welding robots, but there remains a very strong contrast between how they've gotten really good at making stuff versus how they market and sell it. And in my experience, they're not nearly as good at the marketing and selling as they are the making. And if they don't market well and they don't sell well, then they may sell at a lower margin in reaction to imports that they think are challenging them. Their sales teams may not be effective in today's markets. And as a consequence, then they're potentially in, they're financially vulnerable. If there's a downturn, if they're underperforming, that financial weakness during a down cycle or
Right,
whatever.
because marketing is something that has to be done consistently, and you can't just start it and expect results after 2 or 3 months if you're having a bad period. It's what pulls you through the bad period if you've been consistent about it.
I would argue that sales is right there with it. I understand your background, your emphasis on marketing. I think the two absolutely fit hand in hand. I think it's an
Yes.
integrated system.
Yes.
So there's a choice then. I mean, if a company finds itself kind of in a downward spiral, they can just continue that way. They can liquidate, they can file bankruptcy, or they can sell. And I don't know that there's a single best option. I mean, for the owners that have invested their lives and their entire retirement wealth is tied up in the business, there's one set of considerations. For the workers, there's another. For the community, there's another. How do we try to figure out in that situation, if a company hasn't been marketing and selling well, if they're financially vulnerable, and if they're in a tough situation, how can we decide what's the right path forward?
That's, it's a good question. I understand why owners would sell. They've been in it for 30, 40, 50 years. Their retirement savings are tied up in it. They've given their entire life to it. So they want something back. I think the best ones I've seen a few that worked, where the owner specifically sought out the buyer who would keep the company running, who would, honor, yes, I have, these employees will stay working. We're not going to change anything. What you're doing is already good. We're going to help make you better. I've seen those, and Vermont Flannel, as it said I did the interview, and as the marketing, I think it was the marketing CMO, he said the original owner was, one season away from bankruptcy constantly. And so when he went to sell, he made a decision. I don't want to sell to some private equity firm who's just going to ship it all to China. I
Right.
want someone to help us they match our values. And that's what they got. So they were bought. I don't think they were bought. I think it's a partnership with USA Brands. And they have several, I think Vermont Teddy Bear is one of them. They have a clothing company that does men and women's clothing, All American Clothing, I think it's called. And their whole focus is to keep jobs in the U.S.
And some companies figure out how to do an ESOP. I mean, in many ways,
yes, I interviewed one. Yes.
Talk about that a little bit. How did they decide to do that?
I forget what it stands. Employee
stock ownership program.
Stock. Yeah. So the employees become owners of the company. It takes a year, I think, to set it up, and and then there's a board. I think there's a board of directors made up of certain employees, and they're now in charge of running the company, and then they get the profits. So that's one option, to keep the company here and vibrant and growing, versus just selling it.
So
and the owners get some money out of that.
Oh yeah, of course. The owners sell the business. They sell the business to the employees.
To the employees.
And there's a way to make that transaction happen.
Yes.
I think that financial vulnerability is the thread that probably goes through a lot of this. Certainly there's some boomers that want to retire that may be very profitable, but in many cases, these manufacturing companies have been running close to the edge. And there's this vulnerability and something happens and they have to figure out, in many cases, they have to sell because they don't want to just liquidate, and selling is the only option. And so to the extent, I would argue that to the extent that private equity comes in, provides an infusion of cash, brings some outside best practices, provides some stability, provides the imprimatur of credit worthiness, so that their their credit relationships are not constantly in jeopardy. They're not talking about having their credit line called or whatever the case may be. That private equity may actually serve a purpose of preventing businesses from shutting down that might otherwise shut down.
Yes, I agree with that. Hmm.
I also know I've got some clients that are private equity sponsors, or actually, I guess more of the portfolio companies are my clients, but I've got relationships with the sponsors. And my experience is that the smaller funds in the manufacturing space are often very hesitant to change people out. I mean, people, yeah, they longtime loyal employees, but on the sales side, they can't land a new account. On the marketing side, they can't think past trade shows. They can't pass along price increases, so margins start to get compressed, and these people just stay employed. But the private equity folks are hesitant to do it because they don't want the bad press, and they don't want to engender more of the resentment that's been created. So I almost have the sense in some cases, yeah, I get that they want to stand off and let management run the company, but it almost feels like sometimes they don't make as many changes as they need to. Have you seen that on the marketing side at all?
I don't have that much experience with companies the types of companies you're working with,
Got it.
and uh, I've only seen a few. I've talked to I have a client that I write for, and I have interviewed some people, some companies that have been bought by much larger companies.
Right.
But those were all good. That's why I'm saying, yes, they're not going to make any changes, or
So they've
they're
had positive experiences.
they have positive experiences. The only reason I got started on the whole private equity thing was, well, one, because I do go back and I look at, I say I did a write up in 2015 of a company, made in USA. Like I did one, the couch people. Uh, oh God, now their name's right. Anyway, I bought a couch. It
Okay.
was made in USA. Well, now they've got private equity. It's not made in USA anymore.
Okay.
you know, uh, the, and so I go back and I look, and what happens. So the
Right.
private equity comes in. That's what my experience is, and that's where I got started on the Pyrex one, which is, I think,
Corel
what caught
Brands.
your attention was because they're closing down the factory, which was 132 years old, where they
Right.
made glass. That was where glass was made.
Right.
And so, there were 300 people worked there, and now they're going to lose their job. So that's what bothers me.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Not private equity per se. It's closing it down, and now all of these people are unemployed. And now today it's not as easy. There's this whole, meme online. Oh, well, learn to code.
Right.
Well, yeah, my son, I spent a small fortune on his education. He's a software coder. He can't get a job.
Wow.
Because of AI. So, things are shifting and changing so quickly. And, to tell people to take away a person's livelihood, and then just, well, go get retrained. Well, where? Doing what? You just closed down the factory.
Yeah, and then there's understandable depression, and then there's, in many cases, the opioid addictions that follow behind that in the communities.
I know. That's what bothers me. So if you go driving and you go to, towns where the manufacturing firm is now gone.
Right.
I mean, I think what bothers me, and this is why I don't get into this because now it does get political. What bothers me is people don't connect the dots. So you lose your manufacturing base, then you start having crime and drugs and hopelessness and mental despair and suicide rates. That's why I focus on jobs, because
but more than just jobs, you focus on manufacturing jobs. And I agree that I think there's something uniquely virtuous and fulfilling about manufacturing jobs as opposed to service jobs.
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
the essence of the country in many ways can be defined by what we actually make, what we
Yes.
leave behind to define ourselves.
I agree. And, and I grew up working class. I know what it's like to, you know, not have a job,
Right.
to be in a household where the breadwinner doesn't have a job,
Right.
or, you know, my mother, I grew up, my mother was on welfare. That there's shame in that. And that's why I focus on, I work to stay positive, but manufacturing is really important because it provides stability.
Right. Absolutely. That's a great way to define it. I'm surprised that with your clients in the machine shop space, that you haven't seen them getting bought up, because there's been massive consolidations and roll ups
Yes.
of machine shops.
Well, like I said, I just lost one. They got bought up.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is
So
he still with that business?
yes,
So it'll be interesting for you to stay in touch and
yes,
see
I know.
kind of what his journey is like.
Yes,
Maybe that's when he's comfortable telling the story. Maybe that's a great blog post for you to write about life after or life under private equity and the changes, the uncomfortable ones, the good ones, kind of a retrospective.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I do absolutely have a bone to pick with private equity, and that's around inflation. And this is not a manufacturing story, but in many cases, the goal is to increase margin. And in many cases, in the manufacturing space, particularly, they haven't successfully maintained margin. They keep letting it erode. But when private equity buys, that's part of their game plan. It can drive up prices. I had a situation with Mosquito Squad, who I'd used for 10 years to make my life livable in the summer. And it had been consistently good and effective. And I got a renewal notice this year, and they said no price increase. So I called to confirm. They said, no price increase. So I renewed. And 3 minutes later, I get the notification on my phone that the charge came through on my credit card is 40% more than I paid. And so I called back and said, hey, come on, what's going on? And I get this really long answer about, they got bought by a PE backed holding company called Authority Brands, and prices were increased in 24, but because I'd renewed at the end of 23, I had the old price. So actually the 40% wasn't an increase. It was just the current price. I mean, I was shaking my head, like only an MBA could think that was some kind of a rational justification for it. Right. Um, so
yeah. The
I,
same thing happened to my gutter, the gutter cleaning company. I had a
right.
really nice one, no problem. And then all of a sudden they got bought, and these people were stalking me, texting me, trying to upsell me. And I had to block them and say, leave me alone. I'm
Right.
not giving you any more money. They were scaring me.
Yeah, home services is like the big area now. The plumbers, the high vac
Yep.
contractors, the roofers, and I guess gutter cleaning and mosquito spray and who knows what else though. Probably rodent control or pest
Yes.
control. Um, so I would say if we were to reframe the conversation, the real question may be not so much whether private equity is bad as much as two other points. First, are American manufacturers good enough at marketing and selling so they can compete against imports and grow consistently and sell profitably to keep their business strong? I would say that's question number one. And then question number two, when companies are purchased, what's the obligation to employees and to communities and to financial stakeholders? And how much do owners, how much responsibility do owners have to make sure that they're selling not just a financially expedient acquirer, but somebody that's going to honor that legacy and local commitment? Is
So
that
you want me to answer both of them?
Well, do you think that's a fair way to kind of reframe the question?
Oh, yes, I agree. Yes.
Um,
Yep.
and so if we agree on that, then I would say that brings us back to this shared common interest that manufacturers have to learn to market and sell with the same attention to detail, the same process engineering, the same continuous improvement mindset that they do in the back end of their operation, the stuff that they make.
Yes, I
They got to
agree.
do that on the front end.
Yes.
So
Yes. Those,
what are the
oh, go ahead.
barriers to that?
To marketing?
To marketing and selling as thoughtfully and rigorously as they make stuff.
Lack of time, lack
Okay.
of knowledge. I would say that people, small business owners, they don't understand what can be achieved through marketing because they've never done it. So they don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
So one of the things that I do, so as part of of Huff Industrial Marketing, one of my bigger achievements I'm really proud of was, everyone is focused on leads. So now my clients who do ongoing marketing with us, they get what I call the weekly conversion report. And it's a spreadsheet, all nicely formatted, and it explains exactly where their RFQs came from, what channel. And we look at email clicks. I mean, I can say you got this email click from this plate, because it's an event, and then phone calls, whatever else they're e-commerce, and they get a report every week, and they know, oh, we got 10 leads or 10 lead conversions. We call them conversions because, not all of them are leads, but now they have something they can work with. And we started doing this in 2021, 22. All of them go up. The client that, hired me because I was the only one that didn't say he needed a blog, he exceeds goal every month. We have goals, like we're going to get this many, and he exceeds them because we're
so
very
he's
thoughtful. We're very thoughtful.
If I remember correctly, that story was 5 years ago. He's been a client that entire time?
2017, yeah.
Oh, so 7 years ago. Wow.
Yeah. It took a long time. It took like 6 months because he was waiting for a big deal to close. And then he hired us to redo his website. And then he was so happy. He then hired us to do his e-commerce parts store. And then we started doing ongoing marketing. And that's the other thing is, if you're in trouble now, marketing is not going to help you.
Right.
Because it takes time to build all this stuff and to build a name and to build your brand. I hate using that word. To build it's build your brand, showcase your expertise, and to create I use the word thoughtful. We're not just churning out crap to put on the search engine. I personally interview all my clients for all the content that I write. So it's based on their knowledge. I don't go out there on the Google looking for stuff to write about. I'm not doing stuff based on keywords. It's all based on what are you hearing from your customers and what are some of the sales objections you're hearing? What questions do you get? And then I write that content, and over time I call it, so I don't call it, and it's funny, when we started doing his content marketing, I call it the resources section, but we're using the blog function in WordPress. So, but it just, I call it the content marketing 401k, because over time it gets found in Google. It starts sending the traffic back. Does it all convert? No, but it's showcasing the expertise of the manufacturer. And then you can you can use it in ads, you can use it in a newsletter, you can use it on LinkedIn. So, and then it's just like a snowball.
Given the change in behaviors and the rapid decline or erosion in organic search effectiveness, I like the way you're thinking about it, that it's for kind of the authority, the credibility. You're saying brand. Increasingly, I'm saying companies need to cultivate trust. I think it's a little bit different than
trust,
brand.
Yeah, I've been really focused on that one too, and thinking it through a lot. Like, how do you build and maintain trust?
Right.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
And it also doesn't happen just about your stuff, because people the research shows that only 3% of the potential buyers for any given product or service are in the market at any given time. And that means if we want to build trust before they have a project, before they're thinking about buying what we need to do, we need to be speaking to them when they're worried about the other 97% of the stuff.
It could be 2 years. It could be 2 years out.
Yep.
That's something I think about quite a bit is trust and how to demonstrate it, how to build it. And it's not a one-to-one, like in the old days, lead conversion was, okay, you make this giveaway, you gate it, you get a form, you fit, there's my lead. That doesn't work that way anymore.
Right. And so you're describing how you've got this runway to make the marketing effective. I think we get the same thing on the sales side. Let's assume that everyone on our team belongs there. which in many cases they don't. I mean, there's 70% of sales teams are missing quota. Now, some of them is because they haven't been trained. Some of them is because they don't want to work. So we got to figure out who belongs there. But let's assume that everyone belongs there. We still have to train. And then we need an effective sales manager, and we need to develop a sales process. We need a sales methodology. We need a proper pipeline, a pipeline management. We need deal qualification scorecards. We need all this stuff. And so that's going to take a year and a half. And so much like what you're describing with marketing, don't wait until you're in trouble. And if a
Right.
lot of companies are selling because of this financial vulnerability, let's get ahead of that. Let's take,
Right.
a relatively
And
strong
that's what
time.
I hear all the time. My website's not getting any leads. I've heard that since the very beginning. I
Right.
still hear it. And then you say, well, what are you doing for marketing? Total silence.
Well,
Well,
I've got
we've
a
never
website.
had to market. Everybody, the old thing I used to hear years ago, well, everybody knows who we are. Well, what about the people who don't?
Well, how often do you hear people in our industry don't use the internet?
Right.
I hear that one all the time. It just makes me shake my head.
Right. No, I know. And I worked, one guy called, this older guy, and he just didn't, why am I selling on the internet? He said, people, my salespeople should be going door to door. I'm like, are you crazy? Who's going to let them in?
Well,
Don't do door to door.
I would push back. I would argue that increasingly salespeople need to go back to good old fashioned prospecting, but they need to do it in an intelligent and creative ways. And the
Right.
company
But
needs
just
to
going and knocking on a door. I mean, you've got all those no soliciting signs, and that's all, and people are still hesitant about letting people come in.
I think good salespeople figure out their way around that kind of stuff.
Yes.
All right. How about advice? So a lot of marketing advice. How about advice for folks that are trying to buy American?
Oh, that's easy. Much easier. Read the labels.
Okay.
That's how
As
I
long as they're
started.
not covered up by some other cloth.
Right. Well, that's how I started. When I made this commitment, I'm going to buy made in USA. At first I said, I'm going to buy everything made in USA. I'm like, oh no, that lasted a month. But now as much as I can, and I get it. If you don't have the budget or whatever, I found made in USA cycle shoes because I'm a cyclist. They were $700.
Wow.
Like, no. So then I try to find, well, are they made in a different country? I try not to buy China as much as I can. But anyway, read the labels. Where are things made? Before, if you're searching for something and you're going to Home Depot or your local hardware store, just read the labels. Like I can't believe the things I find that are still made here, like curtain rods that you would think they're made in Rhode Island. I looked up the company. So read labels. And then if you can, if you're, do research online. If you have the time to wait for something, like my rake broke, my rake for raking leaves. And so I could have just run over to Home Depot to get a new one. But instead I did research online and I found this small company, Bully Tools, that make rakes and other things. And so I got a rake made in the USA. That's what I do.
Yeah, I think I'm not as committed to it as you are, but I have had some experiences. During COVID, I decided I was going to put a flagpole up in my yard, and it felt particularly hypocritical to have an imported flagpole flying the American flag. And so, I spent time working on that. I think I probably paid about 20% more.
Yeah, you do.
So,
I mean, not for everything, but
right.
yeah, it is. And I say that the benefits of buying made in USA is you buy less stuff because now you're not impulse buying. Like I never go to Target, not Target, TJ Maxx.
Right.
I never buy stuff there anymore. So you save money and you have less clutter and less crap to put in the landfill.
And what do you recommend as resources? If people want to kind of make this part of their lifestyle, they can obviously read your blog. Where else would you send them?
There's also the Alliance for American Manufacturing. There are all kinds of lists online. People who have directories. I thought about doing a directory of made in USA items, but they're really hard to maintain and keep up to date because of companies selling or moving overseas or, they're hard. So I just said, I'm just going to do my blog. And so I really love telling companies stories when I can get those interviews.
And so how do people that have enjoyed this connect with you?
Oh, you can go to my blog, keepitmadeusa.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. It comes out twice a month. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn.
Okay. And I'll put those links in the show notes below this. And your business website is, what is it, huffindustrial.com?
Huffindustrialmarketing.com.
Okay.
The blog and the website they're both on the same. So you could go to either one and you'll find the blog.
Okay. All right. And for resources, so that's resources for Buy American. How about resources for industrial marketing? Places that you can point people that want to gradually learn more about that?
Oh, I read Search Engine Land. I really like SparkToro. It's not so much industrial marketing. Not too many people focus on it.
Right.
LinkedIn is good. I mean, there are some people on there. Not many people focus on industrial marketing.
And then another topic we touched on, how about birding? You spent a lot of time at your Wild Birds Unlimited. Where do you turn for other bird information?
That's the only one.
Really?
I just watch the birds outside my window.
But you don't record them
And then
anymore.
if I have a question, I go talk to Mike at my Wild Birds. And I did ask him, I told him your comment about how your store has lots of made in China stuff.
Yep.
And he agreed. He wanted to know who it was. So you can tell me after. And because he said, that's interesting. Because I said, the reason I come here is because you have so much made in USA stuff. And he said, thank you.
And for background, I had told Dianna in an earlier conversation, the reason I stopped going to the local Wild Birds Unlimited was that it was almost all made in China crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, they're all independently owned. So he's the one choosing that stuff.
Got it.
That owner.
All right. So wrap us up. A couple minutes on what American manufacturers need to understand about manufacturing marketing so that they can thrive as buyer behaviors change.
One, start now. The financial guru I listen to on the radio on Saturdays, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the best time to plant a tree? Now. Start now. Find whoever you work with, make sure that they have industrial manufacturing experience. In terms of marketing, sales, and maybe even inside companies, because the people who are doing B2C, manufacturing is a whole other kettle of fish. So make sure they have that experience, and then make a budget. Because that's the other thing I say. What's your budget? Well, we don't know. Well, set one. And then we can work with that. So make a budget and then be consistent. Just keep doing whatever you decide you're going to do, whether it's LinkedIn or Google search ads or whatever it is, content marketing. Be consistent about it and keep doing it and track and measure, just like you do on your floor. All your process improvements. Marketing is the same way. Continual improvement, tracking what's working and what's not. Like with one client, we focused on how to improve RFQs for 2 years. I can't tell you how many infinitesimal tweaks we made to that website. As they just started, going up. And that's the way it works, exactly the same way in manufacturing and marketing.
There's a mic drop moment. You figured it out in manufacturing. You got to bring that same mindset to marketing and sales.
Exactly. Yes. And it's not, oh, we can get billions of people if we do Facebook. No, it's not going to work that way.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dianna. I know that you weren't sure about undertaking this conversation. I'm grateful that you did. I think it's been a really good conversation, a lot of insights.
And you're very intelligent. Thank you.
Well, that's nice of you to say.
This was a very intelligent conversation.
Thanks for your willingness to go out on a limb and try it. It's an important topic, and there is no right answer. There's good people, there's schmucks across, the entire spectrum, and so it's worth talking about.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for joining Dianna and me for this episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. Be sure to like and share and comment and subscribe. Push this out to people who wrestle with some of the maybe philosophical challenges of sourcing made in the U.S. or when it might be appropriate to sell their business or any of those kinds of things. I think they'll find value in the conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.